This was how the world's greatest empire began to die, not with fire raining from the sky, but with the rhythmic tramp of Macedonian boots crossing a river. You can almost hear them. The clash of bronze, the snort of horses, the steady beat of 1,000 marching hearts. It's spring, 331 BC. Alexander of Macedon, just 25 years old, is leading his men east, toward a power that had ruled for 2 centuries, the Persian Empire. Behind him lies Greece, restless and envious. Ahead lies Asia, vast, ancient, and trembling. Two years earlier, Alexander had first dared to cross into Asia at the Hellespont. To the Persians, it looked like the beginning of another Greek nuisance. To Alexander, it was destiny. He crushed their satraps at the Battle of the Granicus, swept through Asia Minor like a storm, and proclaimed himself the liberator of Greek cities under Persian control. A year later, he faced Darius III, the king of kings at Issus, and humiliated him. The great king ran for his life, abandoning his family, his treasures, and his pride. Yet even in defeat, Darius still ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from Egypt to India, from the Aegean to the mountains of modern Afghanistan. He believed he could still win, not with one battle, but with patience. His plan was simple and cruel. Lure Alexander deep into the east, into deserts and distances where supplies would vanish, and exhaustion would do what his armies could not. So for a year, Darius waited. He gathered troops from every corner of his empire. From India came war elephants. From Bactria came horsemen hardened by steppe winds. From Syria came archers. From the Persian heartland came noble cavalry. And while the great king assembled his legions, Alexander did not rest. He captured Phoenicia, burned Tyre after a brutal siege, marched through Syria, and crowned himself pharaoh in Egypt. He was no longer just a conqueror, he was a symbol, a living myth. By 331 BC, both men were ready. Darius gathered his army on a plain near the small village of Gaugamela, about 75 kilometers from Arbela, modern-day Erbil in Iraq. The site was perfect for his chariots and cavalry, open, flat, endless. He even ordered the ground leveled for miles, removing stones that might trip the blades of his scythe chariots. Meanwhile, Alexander crossed the Euphrates unopposed. Darius could have stopped him there, but he didn't. He wanted the perfect battlefield, one where his numbers could finally crush the Macedonian formation. When Alexander's scouts reached the Tigris River, they found no Persian defense. They crossed under starlight, water up to their necks, clinging to their shields. On the far side stretched a barren plain shimmering under the sun, and somewhere beyond it, Darius waited. That night, Alexander climbed a hill and looked east. He could see campfires stretching to the horizon. The Persians had come in numbers so vast that even the stars seemed fewer. His officers estimated hundreds of thousands cavalry, infantry, elephants, chariots. Alexander simply smiled. At last, he said, "The prize is in sight." The next morning, he ordered his men to rest. They had marched for months, through rivers and dust, through lands that spoke a dozen tongues. They fortified their camp, while the Persians stood waiting, fully armed, expecting an attack that never came. That night, as the Persians shivered under armor and fear, the Macedonians slept soundly beneath their shields. Alexander's calm unnerved even his own commanders. When one asked if he was not afraid to face such overwhelming numbers, he replied, "I am afraid of losing a single opportunity." Before dawn, an eerie silence fell over the plain. The horizon glowed red with the rising sun. Somewhere in that silence, a trumpet blew the sound that would end an empire. Across the field, Darius mounted his golden chariot, surrounded by royal guards and noble cavalry. He looked west, toward a dust cloud where Alexander's phalanx was forming. For the last time, the King of Kings prepared to defend his crown. You can almost feel the moment before the storm, the air heavy with dust and tension, the gods watching in silence. The greatest army in the world and the greatest commander of his age were about to meet on the field of Gaugamela. In the distance, the Macedonian line began to move. Bronze flashed like fire. And the earth trembled not from thunder, but from men who believed they were about to change history. Dawn broke over Gaugamela like a blade cutting through mist. The air was dry, the ground trembling faintly under the weight of tens of thousands of men, an empire waiting to live or die. You stand on that endless plain and see it. Banners stretching to the horizon, glinting armor, chariots armed with blades sharp enough to carve through bone. In the center, high on a golden chariot, stands Darius III, the King of Kings, radiant in royal robes, surrounded by his noble guard and Greek mercenaries. Behind him, elephants sway like living fortresses, their tusks capped with iron. Around him, horsemen from every corner of the empire, Bactrians, Scythians, Cappadocians, Indians, Persians, their tongues foreign, their purpose the same, destroy the invader. Across the field, Alexander's army looks small, 47,000 against perhaps 10 times that number. But where the Persians bring numbers, Alexander brings precision. His formation gleams like a machine forged for war. The phalanx in the center, an unbreakable wall of spears. Parmenion commanding the left flank with Greek and Thessalian cavalry. And on the right, Alexander himself at the head of the companion cavalry, his chosen elite. The Persians wait under the rising sun, nerves tight. But Alexander does not move. He lets the moment stretch, lets fatigue gnaw at the men who had stood armored through the cold night. Then, with a single gesture, he signals the advance. The earth begins to thrum. Step by step, the Macedonian line creeps forward, bronze shields flashing, pikes glinting like a moving forest. From the Persian lines comes a roar, as scythed chariots surge forward, wooden beasts with curved blades fixed to their wheels, designed to shred men apart. Darius watches them go with pride. These are his storm, his answer to Macedon. But Alexander is ready. His light infantry opens the formation, forming gaps between the phalanx columns. The chariots, seeing empty space, charge straight in, only to find themselves surrounded. Arrows whistle, javelins pierce. Horses panic and veer off, trampling their own riders. Others are cut down before reaching the main line. The once mighty charge dissolves into chaos. Darius feels the first hint of fear. Now the sky fills with dust. On the Persian right, Mazaeus leads a thunderous cavalry charge, smashing into Parmenion's wing. The impact is brutal. Macedonian horsemen buckle. Some Persians break through, galloping toward the Macedonian baggage camp, where women, slaves, and supplies are guarded by light troops. Fires rise. Chaos spreads. But while the left is fighting for survival, Alexander is watching calm, calculating. He sees what few others notice. The Persian center is beginning to stretch, a gap opening between the left and right wings. This is it. He gives the order and the world changes. With a cry, Alexander spurs his horse Bucephalus and leads his companion cavalry in a sharp diagonal charge, not at the flanks, but directly at Darius himself. The wedge of cavalry punches through the Persian line like a spear through flesh. The phalanx surges behind them, pressing into the opening. The noise is deafening, bronze against bronze. Hooves pounding, men screaming in 3 languages. Somewhere in the chaos, Darius's charioteer is struck by a javelin and falls dead. The royal chariot wobbles. The great king seizes the reins, but the sight of the fallen driver spreads panic. To many Persians, it looks as if their king has been slain. The line wavers, then collapses. And in that heartbeat, the empire cracks. Darius looks once toward the advancing wedge of Macedonians, then turns his chariot and flees. His royal guard follows, abandoning the fight. What begins as a retreat becomes a rout. The Persians break and scatter tens of thousands, running, stumbling, dying. Across the field, Parmenion still fights for his life. He sends messengers pleading for help. When word reaches Alexander, he hesitates to chase Darius and end the war now, or turn back and save his men. He chooses loyalty. Wheeling his cavalry left, he drives straight into the Persian center, cutting down all who resist. The rescue comes too late for many, but it saves the army. By sunset, The plain of Gaugamela is silent except for the groans of the dying. The dust settles to reveal mountains of corpses, Persians cut down where they stood, chariots overturned, horses twitching in their harnesses. The Macedonians, bloodied but unbroken, stand victorious. Alexander dismounts, his armor spattered with dust and blood. Around him, the survivors kneel. The young king gazes across the field toward the east, where Darius has vanished into the desert. That night, he says nothing. The men feast in silence, their faces lit by firelight. They know what they've done. They've killed an empire that once ruled the world. And above them, under the endless stars of Mesopotamia, the gods watch, knowing the world will never be the same again. The sun rose cold and cruel over the plain of Gaugamela. The dust of battle still hung in the air, mixing with the smell of blood and burned leather. What had been the heart of the Persian army was now a graveyard, broken spears jutting from the ground, corpses stripped by scavengers, and the faint cry of wounded horses that would never see home again. Alexander rode through the aftermath in silence, his cloak, torn and dark with sweat, dragged across the dirt. He had won utterly, completely, yet his face carried no joy. Around him, the men whispered in disbelief. They had faced an army said to be 1,000,000 strong, and they were still alive. The Persians were gone, vanished into the east, their banners abandoned, their king in flight. Some said Darius had fled before the battle was even lost. Others claimed he had tried to rally his men but was swept away by the tide of panic. Whatever the truth, the King of Kings was running a ruler of an empire that no longer existed. Alexander did not rest. He left his wounded behind and led his companion cavalry in pursuit. For 3 days and nights, they rode through the plains of Mesopotamia, following the trail of broken wagons and trampled corpses. Darius had taken what remained of his royal guards and fled toward Arbela, hoping to gather survivors and retreat deeper into Persia. But the empire he fled to was already crumbling. In Babylon, priests came out to greet Alexander with gifts and open gates. In Susa, nobles bent the knee. The people who had once called Darius Lord of the World now hailed the Macedonian as their new master. And still, Alexander pressed on. His goal was not land or gold, it was Darius himself. Somewhere beyond the Zagros mountains, the great king was trying to rebuild. But even his own satraps, men he had trusted now, whispered his name with pity. Among them was Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, a hard, cold man who saw opportunity in the king's weakness. As the Macedonians approached, Darius's caravan became smaller. His guards deserted him. The treasure wagons were abandoned one by one. The once proud ruler of Asia rode now with only a few companions, his royal chariot traded for a simple cart drawn by exhausted horses. Then came the betrayal. Near the desert between Ecbatana and Bactria, Bessus and a few Persian nobles turned on their king. They bound him in chains, intending to deliver him to Alexander not as a gesture of loyalty, but as proof that they, too, had chosen the winning side. But as the Macedonians drew closer, panic set in. Rather than risk being caught, Bessus stabbed Darius and left him bleeding in the dust, fleeing with his men into the east. When Alexander's scouts arrived, they found the king's body in the back of a broken wagon, pierced by spears. He was barely alive. According to the ancient sources, a Macedonian soldier brought Alexander word, and the conqueror came himself to see the fallen monarch. He dismounted, walked to the dying man, and covered him with his own cloak. Darius, the man who had once commanded an empire from the Aegean to the Indus, looked up at his conqueror and whispered a final prayer that Alexander would show mercy to his family and rule with justice over Persia. Then he was gone. For a long time, Alexander said nothing. He ordered the body wrapped in fine linen and sent back to Persia with full royal honors. He was a king, he said quietly, and I will bury him as one. The empire of the Achaemenids, 200 years of rule, 25 satrapies, 1,000 cities was finished. Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, all would soon bear the sigil of Macedon. And yet, even in victory, something changed in Alexander that day. The war had begun as revenge for Greece. Now, it became something else, a hunger without end. He began to call himself not just king of Macedon, but king of Asia, ruler of the world. The Battle of Gaugamela was not merely a military triumph, it was a transfer of destiny. The old order of the East had fallen, and a new, restless power had taken its place. Somewhere in the endless dust of Persia, the ghosts of Darius' empire whispered into the wind of roads that once stretched to India, of kings who had believed they were eternal. But eternity, like empires, always belongs to those who dare to take it. And on that cold morning after Gaugamela, only one man dared. His name was Alexander,